Before gods judged, before scales balanced, before the heart was weighed, there was silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of preparation. Because in Egypt, death was not an ending. It was a process, a passage, a rite. And before the rite, there must be stillness. The world held its breath not in fear, but in respect, for one was coming, not a king, not a god of thunder, not a warrior, but a guide. Anubis, not born of chaos, not crowned in glory, but formed in necessity. Where the others ruled, he escorted. Where the others commanded, he received. He was not worshipped with spectacle, but with precision, because the dead do not need glory, they need direction, and direction requires clarity, disciplined structure. The jackal-headed one did not shout. He did not threaten. He waited. He watched. He remembered. He knew the path because he had walked it not once, but always. And so as a soul begins its passage, Anubis prepares. Not the soul, but the space. The chamber is swept. The tools arranged. The oils aligned. The linens folded. Nothing is improvised. Nothing is rushed. Because the sacred cannot be hurried and the dead must be honored. Before judgment, before the weighing, before the throne of Osiris, there must be the hand, the cloth, the blade, the seal. Each a gesture, each a law, not of morality, but of motion. Because in Egypt, ritual is not for gods, it is for balance. And balance begins with a body now, still now, silent, but not lost, only unprepared. And Anubis waits at the edge of shadow, at the edge of breath, at the edge of transformation, not to grieve, but to guide. He does not mourn, he does not delay, because in death, as in life, there is work to be done, and it must begin now. The body is not the soul, but the soul needs the body, not forever, but for one final act, the journey. And for the journey to begin, the way must open, not a road, but a path between life and after flesh and essence, name and truth. This is what Anubis oversees, not passage, but preparation. He does not carry, he aligns. He does not lift, he orders. Because the afterlife does not accept confusion, only clarity crosses the threshold. The ritual begins not with sound, but with gesture. Priests gather not to chant, but to imitate, to follow the shape set by Anubis. His was the first hand to wrap a limb. His was the first blade to open the body with reverence, not violence. Because to open is not to destroy. It is to release the organs removed, not discarded but kept purified, sealed. Each placed in its sacred vessel, each watched by a god. Because nothing inside the body was seen as waste. All was meaning, all was function. The heart was left, or sometimes removed and weighed later, depending not on choice but on time, place, and priest. Because even ritual has variation, but intention must remain pure. The body is washed, not for cleanliness, but for clarity. Oils are applied not for scent, but for sealing. Wrappings begin not as fabric, but as scripture. Each fold a verse, each knot a name. Because the body is becoming a text, and Anubis reads it. Silently, carefully, faithfully, he ensures no fold is misplaced, no spell omitted, no charm forgotten. Because once the wrapping begins, so does the journey. A journey through fields, through gates, through questions. And each gate, each guardian, each challenge asks one thing. Are you in alignment? Not were you good, not were you devout, but are you intact? Are you in order? Are you whole in name, in memory, in structure? Anubis ensures the answer can be yes, but he cannot answer for you. He only prepares. Because no god, not even he, can make a soul pass, only the soul can walk. And so he finishes the wrapping, he closes the mouth, he paints the sacred signs, and he steps back. The way is open, now the soul must walk it. Anubis does not judge, he measures. Judgment is for others, Ma'at Osiris, the scale itself. But before they speak, he balances the silence, because truth in Egypt was not opinion, it was proportion, and the most sacred proportion was weight. So the heart is placed, not as a metaphor, not as a symbol, but as a fact. It must weigh the same as the feather of Ma'at, not more, not less, because excess is distortion and lack is evasion, and both are imbalance. The feather is not light because it floats, it is light because it is true. Truth has no burden, It does not press, it reveals. So Anubis watches. He watches the hand place the heart. He watches the scale receive it. He watches the beam align or tilt. He does not interfere. He does not argue. He does not console. He is the one who ensures that the weighing is real, because death is not the end of questions. It is where the final answer is given. The answer is not a word. It is a balance. Were your actions aligned? Were your thoughts in rhythm? Was your life measured with care? If yes, the scale remains level and Anubis steps back, because the truth needs no help to stand. If no, the scale tilts and something else is summoned. Not punishment, correction. The devourer waits, not with anger, but with function, because what is unbalanced cannot continue. This is not cruelty. This is design. The soul must match the structure or it returns to formlessness. But this is not for Anubis to decide. He only ensures that nothing distorts the weighing. No lies, no interference, no forgotten spells, no missed names, because every element must be correct for the heart to truly speak. This is the moment Egypt prepared for. This is the truth that gods and mortals alike must face, not as threat but as mirror, and Anubis is the one who holds it steady. Silence in Egypt was not absence. It was a presence, a container, a law, and Anubis was its guardian. He did not speak unless the structure required it. He did not announce, he ensured. Because in the land of the living noise was power, but in the land of the dead, silence was truth. The tomb was not empty. It was precise. Each object, each offering, each line of text had its place. Nothing more, nothing less. To disturb it was not theft. It was disruption of law. And so Anubis walked not as shadow, but as order made visible. He moved before tomb robbers. He moved before grief overwhelmed memory. He moved before time itself could turn reverence into ruin. Because silence could not be trusted to remain unless someone held it. He was not a protector of the body, but of its alignment. Not of treasures, but of their meaning. Every shabti, every amulet, every line of the Book of the Dead was not decor, but design. Each thing had to face a certain direction. Each name had to be intact. Each chamber had to echo, balance, and Anubis checked them all. He did not chase intruders. He prevented misalignment, because if one item, one inscription was wrong, the soul would wander, not in punishment, but in confusion. Because without silence, memory could not form, and without memory, the Ka had no path. The tomb was not a resting place. It was a container of pattern, and pattern was the only thing strong enough to cross death. So Anubis stood between the noise of life and the stillness of the dead. He was not loved. He was not feared. He was necessary, and in necessity Egypt found its continuation, because without silence, there could be no voice, and without Anubis, there could be no silence. He was not a man. He was not a beast. He was a shape meant to be remembered, a black jackal alone, watching, walking, not in the sun, but beneath stars. Because the night belonged to transitions, and Anubis was the guide of those in between. The jackal was not chosen by chance. It roamed where humans feared, near tombs between camps. At the edge of vision, it knew the smell of decay, but did not consume. It approached the dead, but did not disturb. It watched as Anubis watched, because the god was not just above the tomb. He was below it, beside it, before it. And when the stars rose, the people looked not to constellations, but to memory. They saw in the jackal a promise that death was not abandonment, that someone waited. The black jackal was painted, carved, chiseled into stone, not for decoration, but for recognition. He was the first to arrive, the last to leave. He stood when others wept. He walked when others feared, not because he lacked emotion, but because he embodied law. The stars above were maps, and Anubis read them for the dead. He did not move quickly, he did not chase, he waited, and then he walked. He guided not through command, but through presence. The jackal was not loud, but all knew where it had passed, because peace followed, not comfort, not warmth, but peace as balance made quiet, and under the stars Anubis was never alone, because each soul he guided left a trail of silence, and the stars remembered. The tomb was not a place of silence, it was a place of listening, before judgment, before the scale, before the heart was weighed. There was a voice, It did not speak loudly. It whispered in words older than script, older than stone. It was the voice of Anubis, not commanding, not pleading, but aligning. Because the soul before it is judged must remember, and remembering requires guidance. Anubis did not accuse. He reminded in the chamber of darkness there was no torch, no scroll, no priest, only space, only breath. And breath became sound, and sound became meaning. The soul stood naked not in form, but in memory. What did you do when no one watched? Who were you when unremembered? Anubis asked. Nothing. He waited, and in the waiting, the voice spoke, not from outside, but from within. This was the true ritual. Not spells, not oils, not mummification, but this moment when a soul faced itself, and Anubis was the mirror. The dead do not lie, they echo, and in that echo, truth takes shape. The dark chamber was not punishment, it was preparation, because judgment without recognition is noise, but judgment after acknowledgement is balance, and Anubis was that bridge, the one who stood not between gods and mortals, but between forgetting and memory. He did not touch the scale, he did not hold the feather, but he made the weighing possible, because without preparation, there is no fairness, and fairness is the foundation of law. Even in death, there are no drums, no gongs, no shouts. In the hall of Ma'at, silence rules, not as absence, but as presence. A silence so full that it presses. A silence that listens harder than any ear. Anubis does not speak here. He stands still composed, precise because the next act is not his. It belongs to the scale, to the feather, and to the heart. The heart was not symbolic in Egypt. It was not metaphor. It was ledger, memory map. Everything the soul had done, all thoughts unspoken, all acts unrecorded by scribes were recorded by the heart. And now it would be placed opposite a single feather. The feather of truth of Ma'at, not heavy but exact. The scale does not tip from weight. It tips from imbalance. Anubis watched, not to influence but to guard, because even silence can be disrupted, even truth can be touched. So he stood still, protecting the stillness, because the judgment was not by a god but by the law itself, a law older than temples, older than names. If the heart balanced the feather, the soul moved on. If not, it was unmade, not punished unmade, because imbalance cannot cross into eternity. There were no second chances, no bargains, no apologies, only silence, only truth. And Anubis was there, not to decide but to witness, so that the silence remained sacred, so that the measurement remained clean, because without silence there is no scale, and without the scale there is no forever. The gates of the Duat do not swing open like doors, they shift quietly within, because to enter the afterlife is not to cross a line, it is to cross yourself. There are no guards shouting, no horns, no drums, only the weight of recognition. Each soul must face itself before it is allowed to pass. Anubis does not open the gate. The gate opens when the soul aligns, when the heart is clean, not perfect but truthful. The Duat does not accept purity, it accepts honesty. The soul must carry nothing false, no borrowed masks, no stolen names. The gate tests this, not with traps but with reflection. It shows you not your deeds but your echoes, how your choices moved others, how your words created shapes in time. It is not punishment, it is mathematics. The soul must see its own pattern without looking away. This is the first door, and many never pass it, because to see oneself fully without defense is harder than death itself. Anubis waits. He does not hurry the soul. He does not urge it forward, because time in this place does not flow. It listens, and until the soul speaks truth, the gate remains within, not locked but untouched. Only when the soul says, "I am who I am," and believes it does the gate stir, and when it does, it opens not outward but inward, because eternity is not a place you go, it is a place you match. The Book of the Dead was never a book of endings. It was a book of alignment, of instruction, of breath, not written to mourn, but to remember how to breathe after breathing stops. Because in Egypt, breath was not just air, it was name, it was rhythm, it was life made repeatable. And when the lungs failed, the breath had to be taught again. This is why the priests spoke, This is why the scrolls were placed beside the body, not to decorate. But to guide the Book of the Dead was not superstition. It was structure. Each spell, each line was a step in an invisible staircase. Anubis watched as these words were read. He did not need them, but the soul did, because the soul newly freed was like a newborn, blind, unsteady, unsure of direction. The book was not read to impress gods. It was read to remember how to walk in the dark, how to name things, how to declare identity, how to make claims, not with arrogance but with orientation. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not harmed. These were not excuses. They were recalibrations of the soul realigning with order. The Book of the Dead is not a scroll of fear. It is a breath on papyrus. Each line is an inhale, each symbol an exhale, and only when read fully can the soul begin to breathe again, because death is a silence and breath is a return. And Anubis, guardian of the gate, keeper of forms, does not open the way. He waits for the soul to remember how to say I am, to say I am ing, still, to say I go forward, not by force but by breath. There is no fire, no blade, no storm, more precise than the scale of judgment. It does not shout, it does not accuse. It waits, and upon it the heart is placed, not as flesh but as record, because in Egypt the heart did not feel. It remembered every gesture, every silence, every intention. It was not weighed for crime, but for alignment. Against what? Against a feather ma'at, not a goddess only, but a principle, balance, truth order. The unseen design that everything returns to. Anubis stood beside the scale, not as judge but as stillness. He did not tip the scale. He protected its neutrality, because judgment is sacred only when untouched. Thoth recorded, not with bias, but with precision. The feather lay still, as if daring the heart to match its calm. And the heart did not plead, did not justify. It simply was. In Egypt, the soul stood silent before eternity, because speech could not rewrite memory, only balance could prove itself. And if the heart was heavier, not with sin but with misalignment, then the soul would not pass, not punished, not tortured, simply not aligned, swallowed by Amit the devourer, not out of cruelty, but to restore equilibrium, because in Egypt even rejection was balance. But if the heart was equal, then the soul would walk forward, light, not weightless but rightful. This was not mercy, it was structure. Anubis did not smile, he did not frown. He observed, because judgment must be witnessed but never influenced. The weight of the heart is not about guilt, it is about gravity. And in that silence, the soul is known. The journey did not end at the scale, it began there, because balance was not a gate, it was a direction. The soul, if found aligned, did not ascend. It proceeded forward into silence, into halls carved from time, not stone. Anubis led but did not guide. He did not speak, he did not point. He walked ahead, and the soul followed, because in Egypt the path to eternity was not taught. It was walked, each step an echo of past lives, each corridor a mirror without reflection. This was not a test, it was a revealing. The soul did not encounter monsters, it encountered memory rooms filled with scenes, not of grandeur but of detail, moments forgotten now revealed. The soul saw itself in fragments, and fragments when unacknowledged become chains. Some turned back, not by force but by fear, not punished but returned, because Egypt did not condemn, it aligned. The path was not guarded by beasts, it was shaped by truth. False steps did not lead to fire, they led to confusion. Only clarity moved forward, and Anubis always stayed ahead, never looking back, because he was not shepherd, he was threshold. The soul that reached the end was not the same as before, not purified, not judged, but seen truly, because eternity was not granted. It was recognized, and in that recognition, silence was no longer empty. It was presence. The Egyptians did not fear death. They mapped it. They gave it names, gates, paths, chambers, but beyond the rituals, beyond the scripts, was a place with no shape, no map, no edge. It was not chaos, it was before definition, and Anubis stood at the edge. He did not walk there, he did not cross. He waited, because the crossing was not his. It belonged to the soul, to the weight it carried, to the silence it had earned. The land beyond shape was not a punishment. It was possibility. Those unbalanced drifted, not burned, not judged. They became echoes in a realm that does not hold, because balance is not reward. It is entrance. Only those who aligned, who remembered, who returned to themselves, could step beyond. And even then there was no throne, no feast, no glory, only stillness, vast, endless fare. Osiris waited there, not as king, not as god, but as equilibrium, not welcoming, not denying, just weighing, just holding. The land beyond shape was not about belief, it was about design, and those who found it were not immortal. They were placed rightly, perfectly, without need for return. Anubis watched as souls vanished into that silence, not with grief, but with reverence, because in Egypt to vanish correctly was the greatest peace. Anubis does not rest. He does not rule. He remains, not above, not below, but between. He stands in the hush between breath and last breath, between silence and silence again. Where others pass, he stays. He is not life. He is not death. He is the precision that separates them. When the soul is weighed, he is present. When the organs are stored, he is there. When the priest speaks, he listens, not to the voice, but to the alignment behind it. He does not interfere. He does not bless. He does not condemn. He guides. And guidance in Egypt was structure. He places the heart. He ties the cloth. He draws the lines. Because death is not an end. It is a design, and design must be protected. So he protects it, not with sword, not with fire, but with consistency. While gods rise and fall, while kings are born and buried, Anubis remains, watching the silence, maintaining the crossing, preparing the path for the next soul, and the one after that, and the one after that, not for reward, not for reverence, but because the rituals must not fail. And if they do, he begins them again, from the start, because even death deserves continuity. The gate is not always visible, but it is always remembered. It exists not in place, but in intention. Every ritual points to it. Every chant echoes its shape. Every step toward burial is a rehearsal for its opening. It is the threshold between identity and essence, between the name that was spoken and the silence that must hold it. Anubis remembers the gate, not as myth, but as method. He does not guard it. He aligns it. Each gate must match the soul in weight, in structure, in truth. Not all who arrive are ready. And so the rituals prepare not just the body, but the memory of who the person was, because the soul cannot pass if it does not recognize itself. The gate does not open with force. It opens with clarity. It does not judge. It reflects. And in reflection, many see nothing. Many turn back, not in punishment, but in unreadiness. For the gate has no malice. It has only memory. Anubis walks beside it, not as a keeper, but as a reminder. He does not say what lies beyond. He only prepares the space so that crossing can mean something. Because without memory, even the afterlife becomes chaos. So the rituals persist, not to preserve the body, but to preserve the path. And Anubis' silent, steady stays near. So the gate never forgets its shape. The dead cannot speak unless someone remembers how. The mouth sealed by silence is not broken by voice, but by ritual. Because in Egypt, speech is not sound. It is direction. To open the mouth is not to speak. It is to orient the soul, to remind the body what it once was and what it must become again. Priests gather, not as mourners, but as instruments. They do not grieve, they guide. The ceremony is older than stone, older than kings, older than death. It is the breath of memory, given form, through gesture, tool, intonation. A sacred blade touches the lips of the statue or the wrapped body, not to harm, but to awaken. Each movement is a restoration of function, sight, breath, speech, step. Because the body to cross must be reminded of being whole, Anubis does not intervene. He watches, he measures. For this ritual is not resurrection, it is recognition. To open the mouth is to reopen the path. To say, you were, you are, you remain. And through this rite, the dead is returned, not to life, but to journey. Because in Egypt, the journey after death requires awareness, and awareness requires voice. The soul does not walk, it is walked, guided not by instinct, but by remembrance. by the rituals etched into generations, by the truth spoken through silence. This path is not drawn in sand. It is carved in meaning. There are no roads, only echoes. Symbols, markers in myth, and Anubis walks beside. Not in front, not behind, but beside. He does not carry the soul. He witnesses its direction, because every soul must remember its own weight, its own choices, its own name. There is no shortcut, no bypass. Each chamber, each gate demands recognition. You do not pass because you were good. You pass because you are known, not by gods, but by law, and law does not flatter. It balances. The journey winds through truth, not through terrain. It leads through questions. Where were you just? Where were you cruel? Where did you hide? And through each answer a step. The soul that cannot answer does not fall. It simply ceases to move, because in Egypt motion is earned, direction is weighed, and the path, though unmapped, is absolute. It bends for no one, but it opens for those who remember who they truly, where there is no voice, no decree, no explosion of divine sound, only a scale and a silence. The soul stands, not before gods, but before truth. Anubis does not speak. He observes. The heart is placed, not with drama, but with precision. It does not beat. It does not plead. It simply is. Opposite it, the feather of Mot, not light, not heavy, true. And in that stillness, judgment occurs, not as punishment, not as mercy, but as measurement. There are no arguments, no advocates, no witnesses, because in Egypt the truth needs none. The silence is not absence, it is attention. Every detail, every moment held in balance. If the heart aligns, the soul walks forward, not to paradise but to continuation, to become part of the structure, to dwell in the fields of order, to be ongoing. If it does not, it is not cast away. It is unremembered. No fire, no chains, only erasure. Because what is not true, cannot endure, cannot be sustained in the architecture of eternity. Anubis watches, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Because death was never the end, it was the mirror, and only the honest reflection passes through. This is why the rituals mattered, why the body was honored, why the name was preserved, why the journey was taken, why the questions were answered. Because in the silence there is no persuasion, only weight, and those who honored the truth walk light.